All right. What is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod. We are kicking off a Tuesday fitness focused episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Before getting into about three, maybe four topics that I wanted to cover for you, kind of Q&A style here, I wanted to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have plenty of other podcast content that you can and likely are consuming. So I truly never take it for granted that you have chosen to press play and include the Help Me Understand podcast in your listening experience. So thank you so much for being here. If you are not already subscribed to the show or following the show, however it is on whatever platform you're on, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it if you would do that. So if you're watching on YouTube, subscribing to the channel. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever other podcasting platform this may happen to be popping up on, I would sincerely appreciate it if you would follow the show. All right, let's get into today's Q&A / topics here. So this is a format that I've used recently where I'm pulling some different posts / comments / questions that I have answered on threads. And then I bring them here to the podcast and provide additional context, some more nuance, possibly some different angles that I potentially would answer the question from in more depth, basically, than what I would or what I did do when responding online. And some of these actually will be some threads and then some that are questions that were posed to me just throughout my day-to-day life as a coach. So first one is working out for 2 hours too long? Okay, so right off the bat, as I think to JK, the trainer, let's say when I first started out up until actually, I'd say when I first started out, like very, very first got into training, which would have been right around 2015-ish, I would not immediately off the bat have said, like right off the bat, had said, hey, 2 hours is just way too long to be in the gym, because I myself, as I was just learning different things about how to work out and really focusing quite a bit on my own journey with building muscle, which was that really started back around like 2010-ish. A lot of the workouts that I was pulling and following from magazines, and I've told the story before about how my first training programs that I completed came out of this Men's Health Big Book of Exercises, and the very first training program that I ever like fully completed from start to finish was this program from Jim Stepani called Shortcut to Size, I think is what it was called. And it was like a 12-week program. And that was the first time I had ever actually finished a full out, follow what I now understand as a progressive overload based program. It was nothing for me to be in the gym for 1 to 1.5, maybe even 2 hours. And that wasn't specifically focused. And this will be part of my answer or some more that I dig into. I wasn't specifically focused on only doing that particular workout. There definitely was more resting between the sets. I was taking some time to do some mobility and some warm up stuff. I definitely was doing some scrolling on my phone. And if we're thinking back to, 2010 to up to about 2013, maybe then going into 14-ish, things like Instagram and TikTok, although I'm not a TikToker, but, Instagram at that point was just like up and coming. It was just, it was essentially at that point just a photo app that you uploaded photos to because you could use really super cool filters on. It was nothing like it is right now. However, I still found a way to waste time. So initially I would have said, nah, 2 hours. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's too long. I would say now that right off the bat, I've got some additional questions if your workouts are overall lasting you 2 hours. So right off the bat, if I don't have a whole lot of other information, I would say generally, yeah, 2 hours is likely too long. Now, a more nuanced answer would start with getting an understanding for, and this is something that I commented to this person, is I just said, well, kind of help me understand a bit about what a workout looks like for you and how often are you spending 2 hours in the gym? And here's the reason that I ask those particular questions. One, saying that someone works out for 2 hours or spends 2 hours in the gym isn't very informative. All that that tells me is that you got to the gym at, let's say, 6 a.m. and you left the gym at 8 a.m. It doesn't tell me what exercises you did. It doesn't tell me how much weight you lifted. It doesn't tell me how many exercises that you did. It doesn't tell me really much of anything other than how long you spent inside of that physical building. Doesn't tell me if you've got a crew and some friends there that maybe you kind of hang out with while you're there. So with getting some additional information and especially getting an understanding for what does the workout itself look like. When this particular individual responded, I was able to take a look, which was awesome of them to actually respond with like, hey, here's exactly the workout that I did. And in taking a look at it, yeah, there was a lot that was really packed into there. It had a full out mobility and foam rolling piece right to get things started. Then it had, I can't remember exactly how many exercises it was, but it had a good amount of exercises. I'm going to say, let me ballpark it somewhere in the 10 to 12 ish different exercises as part of the main workout. Most of them were 4 sets. And it said that they were supposed to be really difficult sets. Like I think it was a max out week or something like that. So supposed to be fairly heavy. They were all supersets. So I think it was like four to six supersets, which is superset, if you're not familiar, is 2 exercises back to back. So it'd be, I'm just going to make up an example. It would be something like a shoulder press superset with a dumbbell row. So that doesn't mean like you press and then bend right over and row. It means you do like 10 reps of shoulder presses, put those weights down, go grab the weight that you need for your dumbbell row, and then you'll do your dumbbell rows. So you do 2 movements back to back, not in combination in the same like set, so to speak. So this workout included an extensive, again, warm up / mobility with some foam rolling. Then you've got a pretty beefy workout itself. And then it also had cool down movements at the end. Something else that the person added in great detail. And again, this is way more detail than you will typically get when somebody posts a question like that on threads. Like half the time, I'd say actually more than half the time, folks are just over there vibing, and it's me, I'm folks, like we're just posting stuff up. So not necessarily looking to get into real long, intense conversations and detailed things. So this was a rare opportunity where somebody really provided a lot of insight, which was really helpful. So they had that workout, and then they also attached, they said they did about 20 to 30 minutes of weighted hula hooping type stuff. And then there may have even been like a 30-minute, like kind of glutes and something finisher sort of deal. So in looking at all that, then I would say, yeah, that's a whole lot. So the 2 hours is too long based on not the time frame. Really, it's based on, that's just a lot of stuff to do in one session. So that was my feedback for that specific situation. Now, to branch out a bit further, let's say that somebody says like, hey, I from a time frame standpoint, what I've got available to me is there's an average week I can get to the gym twice and I have plenty of time. Like I got not all day, but I've got most of my morning up until about 11 a.m. I've got wide open on Mondays and Thursdays. Other than that, I do not have the bandwidth, the support system, the energy, or the time or the crayons to get into the gym at all. Then I would definitely see how someone could and maybe even should spend 2 hours inside of the gym if they're going 2 days per week. Now, here's what I'll throw out there. Here's what a session potentially would look like if somebody was doing something like that. I don't even know. 2 hours still might be a stretch, to be straight up with you, but I'm trying to put on my creativity hat here and think to myself, okay, somebody has 2 days that they can get into the gym. They have 4 hours each of those 2 days. They want to make the most of it. And those are the only times that they have to really dedicate to building muscle, working on getting stronger, They can go for, periodic walks here and there throughout the week, but this is their time to shine. Okay, cool. Then what we are going to do, we're going to do a basic primer that'll probably take about 6 to 8 minutes at most, maybe. So that'll typically start off with about 3-ish minutes of some cardio of choice. And then we'll do some mobility work that'll be related to the main workout that they're going to do. Then we're going to do a full body lift. So a full body lift, we're going to work either all of the major muscle groups or all of the major movement patterns, just depending on what the vibe is here. So let's say all of the major movement patterns. So we're going to make sure that we do some sort of a squat. We're going to make sure we do some sort of a lower body hinge. So squat would be, let's say, for example, like a back squat or a deadlift or a goblet squat. Then we are going to do some sort of a lower body hinge. So we'll do like a deadlift or a Romanian deadlift. We may do a hip thrust, just depending on what the goals are. Then we're going to do some upper body pushing slash pressing. Hope I don't get shut off for that. We are going to do something like a shoulder press or an incline bench press, something along those lines. Then we're going to do something for upper body pulling. So that will be a dumbbell row, a bent over row, pull downs. So we're going to work all of those movement patterns, and we more often than not, we're probably going to do about 5 to 6 really hard sets of each of those muscle groups. So we'll probably do 2 different squat movements, 2 different hinge movements, and then 1 to 2 different upper body or upper pull and upper push movements, and then we'll swap all that. I'm not going to build a whole program right here while I'm on the mic here right now. However, the general idea is we're going to spend the majority of that time really focused on some intense exercise when it comes to muscle building. So we're going to go heavy. So at that point, we're probably taking about 50 minutes to do that. So at that point, we probably have reached about 1 hour so far inside of the gym, because we're really, really taking our time to go through that particular portion. So at that point, we're at about an hour. Then after that, we are going to take a few minutes just to cool down from the weightlifting, and then we're going to do some cardio. So again, keeping in mind that this is somebody who, this is a rare opportunity for them. They have 2 days per week that they can really like go all out, and they can block off literally a 4-hour stretch. Then we are going to do somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 minutes of cardio, and we likely are going to do some high intensity cardio. So we're going to do something where we potentially are warming up, getting that heart rate up, body weight wise, whether it be using the elliptical or some treadmill jogging, maybe some rowing, some biking, whatever it might be, for a couple of minutes. And then we're going to do some rounds of, say, like 30 seconds, like balls to the wall sprints. You may have heard of it called like sprint interval training. So we're going like 20 to 30 seconds ish. We are going all out, like no holds barred. And then we're going to rest, maybe even walk, like light walking, because we're truly trying to recover. We're going to do that for 1 minute to 2 minutes, because we're going to need all that time to recover. We're going to do that for somewhere between 4, maybe even up to 6 rounds. And then after that, we are going to completely cool it down, and then we're going to call it a day. So by the time you go through all of that stuff, and really the majority of it is going to be the weightlifting portion of it, just straight up. By the time you go through all of that, that easily can turn into somewhere around an hour 15 to hour and a half workout. And then we're going to go ahead and call it a day, and we're going to go get some really, really good food. We're going to refuel with from a heavy carbohydrate source, get some protein in there, and then go on with the rest of our day. So that is a scenario where I could easily see somebody taking an hour and a half to 2 hours inside of the gym. Now, keep in mind, again, the scenario that I created there, I was trying to be somewhat kind of narrow it down a bit without making it super niche. Like, okay, well, it's got to be this exact type of person. Generally, what I would say is when somebody that I come across has such a schedule and a lifestyle and commitments where there are 2 days that they can really spend a longer amount of time in the gym, then we would pack more into that particular session, knowing that outside of the gym, we just have to be tighter than most. So we don't get, we don't get as much, let's say, leeway or we don't have as wide of lanes on the highway, or as many lanes on the highway as folks who may be able to dedicate more frequency do, just straight up. So when there is less availability from a training standpoint, number one, we really got to be on point with the training that we're doing. And then number two, where we have to be really tight, knowing that we may not necessarily be able to get in a ton of volume, or really, let's say, more like frequency, then we got to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves when it comes to eating well and sleeping enough. When we think about the foundational habits, which is eat well, sleep enough, exercise regularly, we're still exercising regularly for what we have available in this particular scenario. And also, we really got to be pretty laser focused on the eat well, and especially on the sleep enough, assuming that, hey, our schedule is such that getting some time to myself really happens a couple of times a week, and that's about it. So hopefully that is somewhat helpful. So again, the question was, is working out for 2 hours too long? Uh, at the end of the day, I have more questions about what are we doing that takes us 2 hours, because really, when it comes down to it, rarely is the general population individual, and I'm considered general population because I'm also not a competitor uh, or trained professionally for events or anything like that. And my livelihood is not specifically dependent only solely on my physical performance. Like, sure, I guess you could kind of, you could indirectly say that my level of fitness does impact potentially somewhat what my income looks like and things like that. However, it's not my only thing. It's not my end all be all. So I would still put myself, for the most part, in general population, in that I don't train as a profession. Like, I don't train myself as a profession. So with that being said, um, I would question that most folks, general population wise, when they're in the gym for 2 hours, they're probably not actually working out for the full 2 hours. We're doing some other stuff, probably bebopping, hanging out and having some conversations and things like that. And maybe even like doing some stuff on our phone in between, that sort of thing. So just wanted to throw that out there. All right. Next question. And this is actually going to be somewhat related to something that I just talked about. So there was a person that posted, what worked for bodybuilders and athletes did not work for a full-time entrepreneur and mother. So again, the post said, what worked for bodybuilders and athletes did not work for a full-time entrepreneur and mother. And in this particular instance, this individual, I believe she was a branding expert. And so there was more to that particular post where she said, and just as, I worked with somebody who tried to put me on the same plan as they had for their previous like bodybuilders and athletes, and it didn't work for me, I make sure that I take an individualized and tailored approach as a branding expert for you. So I thought that was one pretty cool use of her own individual experience to translate that into, I experienced or I went through this experience where somebody did not tailor the approach to me. And I know how much of a struggle that can be, where you feel like you're failing because that person's system isn't working for you. And then it turns out that person's system wasn't made for you and that she does something different. So bravo to her. Great way to flip that. And also, I had commented just to ask if there was anything in particular that I could learn from as a coach and a trainer that her trainer had her do that did not work for her as a full-time entrepreneur and mother, because many of the folks that I work with fit within one or both of those categories, especially being a mom or a parent just in general. I work with a lot of parents, or have worked with and currently do work with a lot of parents over the years. So what she specifically mentioned was the nutrition and the amount of workouts, like how the intense, I believe it was the length of the workouts. So that's why I was saying this one's very relatable to the first one that I talked about. So this is something I want to briefly touch on this one. I won't go anywhere near as in depth as I did on the previous one. This is something that I have come across this more than just a little bit here. When you have someone who primarily works with bodybuilders and athletes. And especially, I'll narrow it down more. When you have someone who specifically works with mostly competitors, so mostly bikini and figure and fit model and wellness athletes. And then if they work with men, they're working with like classic and bodybuilding and physique and things like that. If they primarily, not just exclusively, but primarily work with bodybuilders, one of the questions that I strongly recommend that you ask is have them help you understand what are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences when it comes from their point of view when it comes to coaching competitors versus what we'll call lifestyle clients. And I want to give a shout out to a former coach that I had. His name is Stephen Bogrand. And when I worked with him, he worked for Team Pro Physique, which is at this point still a very, very well-known organization or company that coaches competitors, and they also coach lifestyle clients. And at the time, I had reached out to Team Pro Physique because I specifically, for 1 year, wanted to work with a coach who primarily worked with bodybuilders, even though I had no intention on competing or anything even close to that. I wanted to go through what it would be like, the experience. Excuse me. I wanted to go through the experience to find out what it might be like working with a coach who primarily works for a company that primarily trains competitors. And the first coach that I was paired up with ended up leaving that company. I think I want to say it was within maybe about 4 to 5 weeks or so of when I first signed on with them. Steven, I was moved just blindly, like I was actually moved to Steven, and it was a fantastic experience, like ridiculously good experience working with him. And still to this day, periodically via social media, I'll be able to still connect with him via social. And we've actually run into each other at the Arnold Sports Expo and Fitness Expo in Columbus, Ohio, the past like 2 to 3 years. Fantastic guy, had a fantastic experience. He has since moved on to form his own company. However, if you are looking for a recommendation for somebody who has uh, deep experience working with both male and female competitors, in fact, I think that I don't want to misspeak, or from my point of view, I think he may have even more experience with female competitors, but you talk about somebody who like knows their stuff, and really understands like the ebbs and flows and can better than just about most that I've seen navigate between protocols that you might use for bodybuilders versus protocols that you may use for lifestyle athletes. Stephen Bogrand is your guy. So back to the point though, why I kind of basically spent a few minutes kind of gushing about Stephen is because he was a rare breed. Because why I recommend that you ask if you're going to be working with somebody who primarily coaches, or primarily like based on their content, it seems like the majority of the people that they coach are competitors and athletes. Ask them from their point of view, what are the similarities and what are the differences, is because more often than not, again, just in the exposure that I've had to either the coaches themselves or more specifically clients who have worked with coaches who primarily work with bodybuilders and competitors, there's not a whole lot that they necessarily will do different other than not having a specific like show in mind. So when I remember having a conversation with a coach who primarily worked with bodybuilders and competitors, mostly females, I believe, and and works with lifestyle clients. And I remember during the conversation, one of the things that they mentioned is when they were coaching lifestyle clients, getting them ready for vacations, maybe even a photo shoot, things like that. They mentioned the term trace carbs. So when somebody utilizes what's called trace carbs, so TRACE, uh, trace carbs inside of a dieting protocol, what you're doing at that point is you are cutting the carbohydrate intake so low that it's basically like, hey, I'm not really prescribing carbs in your macro plan or your meal plan. It's basically just whatever you happen to pick up. So, for example, you might just be super heavy on protein and we're going extremely low carb, and extremely low carb would be whatever carbs. So, extremely low carb in combination with trace carbs would be it's just whatever carbs you happen to be included in the fish that you're eating, whatever carbs happen to be included in the steak that you're eating or the chicken that you're eating, like that sort of thing, because you're just going for complete like carb depletion. That is very, for the most part, that is very specific to bodybuilding type protocol. So when someone is utilizing something like that for lifestyle clients, that's something that you want to be aware of. I'm certainly not here to say that it's the wrong move. What I want to say is it's, from my perspective, an example of taking a very specific bodybuilding protocol and applying it to a lifestyle client. So even though that lifestyle client may want that same specific outcome that, say, a competitor would have, they want that look on stage. Something to remember is that competitors on their show day typically are not healthy. They may look super, super lean and super, super jacked. However, they're typically not their healthiest on that particular day, because typically when you look your absolute leanest, and we are talking about like, pardon the term, dick skin lean, like super lean, you typically are not at your healthiest. So when you also have a client who wants to look that particular way, depending on kind of where you stand as a coach, if you decide that you're going to use those same exact protocols, then something that I want the client then to flip and keep in mind is that you are using ramp up to get ready for stage protocols on someone who has no stage to step on and also has a full out like responsible life that they have to lead. So, you know, while I do understand that bodybuilders, competitors, everybody who's under that umbrella, they have lives to lead, like for sure. Like let's not get it twisted. Just understand that many times folks like that have a support system and or a system that is set up around them to ensure that they are able to focus the majority of their time, effort, energy, and most of all their mental capacity on their bodybuilding sport. Like that's what they're really focused on for that particular period of time. And I'm not even talking like super high level. This is even like at the amateur level. Like some of my friends who've competed at the amateur level, the amount of commitment and just absolute like reworking of their life that has to be done sometimes in order to support what they want to do. It's something that's one of the things that I've mentioned a couple of times when I've had people here and there sometimes would just ask, hey, would you ever want to compete? And I say, nah, I got to be honest with you. Like is it something that's crossed my mind? Absolutely. And then I think about the different sacrifices that I would need to make in order to make that happen and what I would need to ask of those around me to make it happen. And I'm not willing to do that because the reward wouldn't be great enough for me, just for me particularly. And that is it. I mean, I've had a few competitors on the podcast, they're friends of mine, like all that jazz. So just wanted to share this particular post, like really just sparked that thought process for me with, you know, taking specific bodybuilding and performance based protocols and them not necessarily working for a true lifestyle client. That's understandable. Now, it doesn't mean that none of that stuff applies. In this particular case, it sounded like the nutrition was probably a super restrictive, very specific meal plan, probably like tilapia, rice, and broccoli, green beans, you know, stuff like that. And then the length of the workouts and the frequency of the workouts. I mean, it's nothing to, for a certain period of time, have to do 2-a-days because you got to get your cardio in and also your lifting in. You're not lifting like 3 to 4 days a week. You've got to get way more volume in. So you're probably close to 5 to 6 days per week. Again, that's just the lifting, not also without even mentioning like how much cardio there is, the focus around the meal planning, the sleep. You've also got posing, you've got all sorts of different things. So I could definitely see how that does not translate for most lifestyle folks. Now, things that do translate would be still approaching your day with intention, still making sure that you are lifting heavy, making sure that you are focused on sleep, making sure that you have some sort of guardrails that are set up as you navigate the different lanes of the highway when it comes to your nutrition. So different things like that. So although the statement said what worked for bodybuilders didn't work for me, I think that when you really, again, peel away some of the layers and get into the nuance of things, you start to really understand that really, from my point of view, it's about there's going to be some very specific protocols that just are not, from my point of view, they're just not meant to transition outside of that particular sport. I would say the same thing. I'll wrap this up, this question up. I would say the same thing when it comes to any particular field. Like there are just certain things that when you are a specialist in that field or you are deeply ingrained in that field, then it doesn't necessarily translate over into somebody who's casually interested. So that's what I've got for that. All right, let's go with this last one here. This one will end on the inspirational tip here. So the question that was posed is, if someone wanted to give up on their fitness journey, what would you say to them? All right, two general responses that I would have here. So if you were to say to me, "Hey, I think I'm going to quit this thing. I got to give up on this whole fitness thing." What I would say is I would respond first with a question. So why did you start this in the first place? And understanding that, how will quitting today help you with that? So if you're looking to quit, like just be like, "Listen, this is too much. Like I can't do all this." Then I would ask you, why did you start in the first place? And how is quitting today going to help with that? The answer there is that it's not going to help. Now you may say, well, I need a break. I got to take some time off. The coach in me is going to say, okay, I hear you. Here's what I'm going to ask you. Instead of completely stopping and air quotes, taking a break, what part of your plan can you follow through on? So what can you actually complete? And this is where this is the difference when you're really like working through things, because you start to expose particular things and belief systems that folks thought that getting into a specific like phase, let's say like fat loss or whatnot, they thought that it was just about hitting their macros, and they thought that it was just about drinking their water, and they thought that it was just about getting in 10,000 steps, and they thought that it was just about making sure that they get in 4 workouts, and they thought that it was just about making sure that they sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. And while those are particular tactics inside of the journey itself is really about dismantling the beliefs that have allowed you to quit previous times. So this idea or this question of, what do I do? Because I think I just want to quit. The first thing that you do is you face whatever it is that's telling you that it's a good idea to quit. And in this particular instance, it could be something like all or nothing thinking. So when you're then when the reply, so when you say, "Hey, like I think that I want to quit," and I say to you, "Well, what part can you still follow through on?" If you weren't to quit, so let's say quitting is option A, then option B, your thinking is, okay, I can either quit A or I can B, do absolutely everything. I'm throwing in there option C. What's one thing that you can do? And when I do have this conversation with folks, very often the response is, "Oh, well, I guess I never looked at it that way." And that right there, like that point where somebody says, "Oh, I guess I never really looked at it that way," is where that other perspective comes into play. And that's when like the real work starts. Like that's where you get beyond the macros, and you get beyond the weightlifting, and you get beyond the crafting the perfect, macronutrient profile meal and drinking a gallon of water and all that stuff. Like that's where you get deeper than that, not past of it, but you get deeper than that, because you start to uncover, okay, what are the beliefs that are popping up right now that probably feel uncomfortable? They feel totally unfamiliar. Or I should say uncomfortable. They feel uncomfortable. They're probably familiar. And your typical response was to quit. And now I just threw out an option that was like, well, yeah, I mean, you can quit. So you can either keep going full out, you can quit, or you can do part of what you said you were going to do. So there's that. And then I'm going to leave you actually with this. There was this piece of advice that I was given a really long time ago. And I really wish I could give credit to the person who gave it to me because it has never, ever left my brain since they said it. And they said, you're not allowed to quit on a bad day. Like, just tell yourself, I will not quit on a bad day. Even on my worst day, I'm going to do what I can. And then I'm allowed to quit on a day where I totally nailed absolutely everything 100%. So basically, I can't remember. I wish I could just remember who it was. Basically, in the conversation that we were having, we were talking about having a really, really tough day at work, I believe, at that time. And they said, I don't know. I just feel like we can't quit on a bad day. Now, if it's a day that went like perfectly fine, we nailed everything and we just think like we're the bomb.com and we got it all done, let's quit on that day. And the catch 22 of it all, for lack of a better term to think of, is, well, who wants to quit on a day where you're just like, yeah, I am him, as my son would say, like I nailed everything. You wouldn't want to quit on that day. But on a bad day, you want to quit. You just don't allow yourself to. It's like, I'm not quitting. I'll figure something out. I'll do some version of this thing. So don't quit on a bad day. Quit on a day where you got everything 100% done and perfect. And there's the rub. There's probably never going to be a day that you get 100% perfect. But hey, it works. It's helped me get through things. So maybe it'll possibly help you. All right. With that, we are going to go ahead and call this an episode. If you have listened this long, I truly, truly appreciate you. If you do have particular questions, topics, anything like that, fitness related or otherwise, that you would you'd be interested in submitting or you want to submit, so that I can take a look and maybe riff on it for a future episode. I'm definitely always open to receiving ideas for topics, questions, all that stuff, especially ones where you typically feel like you're being given some sort of a very blanket, blasé, like maybe even temporarily inspirational answer. And then the same thing keeps popping back up and you feel like you really haven't like dismantled that particular thing and gotten into the nuance of things. Then that stuff is right up my alley. So shoot me a message. You can either hit me up on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. McLeod is spelled MCLEOD as in David. So at Coach JK McLeod, or you can email me jk@jkmcleod.com. All right, with that, we are going to call this an episode. So thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Take care of yourself. I'll talk to you next time.